Thank you very much for joining us on this Friday. John Jenkinson, let's get right to it. Rich Nelson, Allendale Incorporated on the line with us. Rich, we got a lot of stuff to get to here. First thing this morning was the export sales numbers, and they came in, well, kind of disappointing a little bit on the disappointing side, I should say, of corn and wheat, but soybeans above the top end of the trade estimates.
They certainly were. So these sales today, these were made between June 22nd and June 28th, so quite a bit, of course, before the current time frame. And as far as corn sales, we saw 673,000 tons. This number was actually under the trade estimate there. Soybeans, like you mentioned, were very strong. Combined old and new crop, over 1 million tons. In fact, 1.020 million tons. That was clearly above the trade estimates there. And looking on the wheat side, 440,000 tons posted right in the middle of the trade range. So, like you said, feed grains may be a little mixed, but certainly on the soybean side, a little surprising numbers here today.
Rich, just before we went on the air, Marlon Bowling and I were in the newsroom talking about these numbers, and he made an excellent point. If you really dig down into these numbers and start looking at where some of these exports went, some of these say switched from China.
Certainly right, and that has been a very clear discussion point for many in the trade. And we know we're not going to get this massive net cancellation going on as far as China, but and nothing done there as far as a second step. Instead, most of these sales will be made and then switched over to the people here. So, for instance, on today, we did see sales to the Netherlands, for instance, on the soybeans, and those were switched from an unknown destination. In fact, same thing there for sales to Pakistan as well. So a few others on this list all switched from China or unknown. So on the positive side, we are finding other buyers here in the short term.
All right, let's look at the overnight trade, because this was kind of interesting as well. We were rather mixed all the way across the board, with the exception of a few areas. The September corn contract up 1 1/4, December up 1 3/4, 366 1/4. Soybeans, they were higher in the August by 1. November was up 3/4, 856 1/2. Wheat market last night kind of mixed, with December Chicago down 3/4. Kansas City wheat for December was up 1 1/2 cents at 5.26. Minneapolis wheat for December was up 1 1/4 at 5.65 3/4. Looked like a kind of a quiet wait and see what the trade issue is today.
Exactly right. So as of midnight here, we did have the official U.S. Trade issues, trade tariffs go on against China, and of course they responded immediately as well. On the positive side, like you mentioned, very little price response. Looks like we've had a lot of time to prepare for this. So on a positive basis, hopefully most of the worst is behind us, but still we don't have any resolution yet to these trade issues. It looks like in the short term we don't have anything yet on the schedule here.
Rich Nelson, Allendale Incorporated on the line with us. And when we come back, we'll talk about the export numbers in the livestock and get more analysis of what this all means. That's coming up next here on the Market Day Report. The weekly export sales numbers that were released this morning also had information for beef and pork. Closer look at these, we find out here that beef came in at 12,900 net sales, 12,900 metric ton, that is. Pork, 16,500 metric ton for the net sales this time around. And on the line with us, he held on through the break, Rich Nelson, Allendale Incorporated in McHenry, Illinois. Rich, what about these numbers? What do they tell the trade?
As far as the beef side, these maybe were a little disappointing. In fact, these were lowest sales there in 6 weeks as far as these weekly beef numbers, and about 24% under last year. This probably doesn't foretell a new trend here for us. It's probably more or less a 1-week negative aberration here in what has been a good export sales season so far. On the pork numbers, here we are at 16,500 or so. This number actually in this case was about 25% over last year. It was a bit under last week's sale, but compared with this week as a whole, it was an okay sale on the whole.
Something that you mentioned was that this may be just a spot in the road compared to the big picture. How does this all fit in? Do you think the trade will look at it the same way?
I do think so in the big picture. And keep in mind, these sales, in fact, our year-to-date numbers are still incredible, 21% over last year. I believe the USDA's goal is only like a 4 to 8% year-over-year increase. So we're actually doing relatively fantastic in the grand scheme of things. So 1 week is not going to hurt us too much here.
Yesterday, we saw the live cattle and the feeder cattle both spend most of the day on the positive side, and then we did dip down just a little bit, but then came back. This morning, we've got asking prices for this cash cattle trade at 113 to 115 in the south. Packers are bidding 110. We're still quite a ways apart here.
We sure are, but on a positive side, at least, we can point out that Packers are being a little more aggressive than we thought we thought they would be here. So good to see this number will be an increase over last week, and further adding a little more presence, a little more value to the proposition of saying maybe we have the year's cash cattle low in here.
What about the weakness in the boxes? Is that a concern?
It is. In the grand scheme of things, this early summer time period is not that much of a problem here for us because this beef oftentimes trades differently than cash cattle, at least during this period of time. So for right now, it's a problem, but we're not going to say it's a major issue here for us yet.
All right, Rich, thank you very much. Rich Nelson, Allendale Incorporated, to join us here to kick things off this morning, and the markets be opening up here in just a little bit. We'll find out what kind of reaction we have to this. Let's check the dollar and find out how we're going to go into Friday, because this is something we've been watching pretty closely here lately. September dollar index down 480 points at 93,750.